Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am flipping the February 2024 Spellbinders Club Kits. Here's a quick look at the 4 cards I'll be making today, and as per usual for my flip cards, one will be flat, one layered, one interactive, and one will be a pop-up card. My video today I'll be featuring the Better Press Club, the Stencil of the Month Club, the large and the small dies of the month, and the clear stamp and die of the month, and finally the embossing folder of the month. I also do get the glimmer of the month and the wax seal of the month, but those I'll have to save for another video. Let's make these. Okay, I'm going to start off with my flat card, and for this card I thought I would feature the 3D embossing folder of the month. Now there are 2 embossing folder clubs. One is the standard folder, and what I have is the 3D folder. What I thought would be interesting is to pick some Easter, maybe slightly pastel colors, and take a nested shape die from Spellbinders and just cut out a lot of frames and nest them together. All I'm doing here is just applying some low contact, very thin, I think this is actually washi tape, and that way I can attach everything so that I can work with this as a single panel. The reason why I did it this way is because I want to emboss this, but I want the design to be continuous across all of those frames. And the nice thing about embossing just a smaller piece that's maybe just a focal element on your card is that with these larger folders, you can really be selective about where you position this. So I made sure that I positioned this so that there's an egg directly in the center of my design, and it's that way it kind of makes it look even more like this is meant to be, the focal point and not just, the start of a background that you then layer more things on top of. Now, for my flat cards, I define a flat card not strictly as just the card base, but rather your card base plus at most one layer of cardstock, and then relatively flat embellishments on top of that. So that the idea being that you can safely send this for just the cost of a single stamp, and you don't have to worry about triggering extra postage because it's too thick or because it weighs too much. So that's the idea behind making relatively flat cards, but not completely flat, so that I can have some design flexibility, because I think if I stuck strictly to just the card base, it would be too much of a challenge for me. I don't think I could come up with enough ideas. So what I've done is I've stamped and die cut a sentiment out, and I chose Happy Easter from the clear stamp of the month. There is the option to get just the stamp by itself if you want to subscribe to the club, or get it with its coordinating die. And what's nice about having the coordinating die is that there are, in this month's club, a die to cut out each of the sentiments. Most of the time, I think you get coordinating dies for sentiments on at least some, and I think this month every single sentiment has a coordinating die, which I really like having. I don't know if that's relatively new, because I didn't used to see a lot of it, but now I'm seeing a lot more coordinating dies for sentiments. It's just a little white border all the way around. It's not like a square banner, which I find I love as well, but the look of just that really nice small white border around a shaped sentiment is really nice. So for example, this sentiment, along with Spring Greetings from this set, it's actually in an arch. So the die will cut it out very precisely. And what I did was die cut it out of black as well, so that I can create a little bit of a drop shadow underneath the sentiment, and that just helps that white cardstock that I stamped the sentiment onto stand out a little bit better. And to finish my card, I pulled out some sequins from Spellbinders that match my cards, and that'll be it. And I'll show a close-up at the very end of this video of each of my cards. Now, moving on to my layered card. For this card, I pulled out the stencil of the month, which, by the way, would be a great option for flat cards as well, but I'll actually be using it on my layered card. This month, we get, I believe it was 4 stencils, and these are not a layered stencil set. They are actually independent designs, unique designs from each other. And what's cool is that you can use them to create really great backgrounds, really great borders. And there's one, in fact, this is what I really love about it, because there's one stencil that has, built into the design, it has a circular area that's been cut out of the design, and there's part of the stencil creates a really nice frame so that within that circle you have a nice blank space to create a focal image, to stamp a sentiment, whatever you'd like to do. And what's nice is that they Spellbinders included the circle that they cut out of that design. Well, that circle is a great mask. So that's how I'm using it here. I've got a stencil that is the full design. It's perfect for A2 cards. And what I've done is decided I want to maybe compose a little scene in this lower right corner. And instead of stenciling the full background, I actually used that circle mylar piece as a mask. And that way, when I lift this up, you can see I've got that nice clean space that I can then build my scene into. I'll be honest, originally this was going to be my flat card. Because I was thinking of actually stamping into that circle, but I decided instead I really wanted a nice border around my focal image, and I also wanted to use the Better Press and press out this gorgeous floral spray, and so that meant having to layer a couple of additional layers of cardstock. So in the end, it would break my my self-imposed rule or definition of a flat card. And so but you could do something similar if you wanted to maybe reverse the masking and use the stamp that came in with the Clear Stamp Club and do something very similar, and then just stamp your design into that circular area. So this could easily be a flat card, and 100% flat because I stenciled directly onto my card base. But instead, I'm gonna, since I already started adding layers, I'm gonna continue adding even more. So I've got the purple cardstock, which, you know, it does cover that masked off area completely. But I decided to just leave this in the way it is, just so that you can see the technique of using that circle as a mask, that circular mylar piece as a mask. And that way you can choose where you want to put your focal image or where you want to sort of highlight an area on your card. Even though for my card today, I could have just as easily inked the entire panel and it really wouldn't have made a difference because I'm covering it with cardstock anyhow. But just to show you the technique and also give you an idea for how you could use this as a flat card, I decided to just leave it in as is. And to complete my card, I've also pressed out the hummingbird from the Better Press Club, and this month the hummingbird, or the Better Press Club, is the one that has the add-on. And the add-on is really great. It works by itself too. But it coordinates beautifully with the Better Press Club, and it includes a hummingbird, but it's flying from the opposite direction, so it's facing to the right, whereas the hummingbird that is part of the club is facing towards the left. And I love that they thought to do that because, for example, like if I had my focal image and the scene here, instead of putting it on towards the right of my card, if I wanted to position it towards on the left of my card, I would tend to want my bird to face towards the center of my card. And so by having both the club and the add-on to the Better Press Club, I have that option with the bird because in the club, the bird is the one I'm using on this card and it's facing towards the left. And the add-on, the bird is facing in the opposite direction, towards the right. So that kind of gives you more composition variety, and not that it would look bad to place this particular bird to the left of your card. For me, it just feels a little bit unusual. So so that's why I personally love having the options. And since this is a layered card, I can use more dimensional adhesives like my 3D glue gel, which I love to use behind smaller or irregularly shaped die cuts because it's a lot easier to get behind those areas. Now, moving on to my interactive card. I watercolored the clear stamp of the month. I did that 100% off screen because these flip videos I know are already pretty long as it is, and I thought leaving that in would make it just even longer. So what I wanted to do was just start off with a colored panel, and the die that coordinates is actually pretty cool. So this die it doesn't cut just the outline. It actually cuts all of the little spacing in between the flower petals and leaves. And so you get this really cool frame almost because it does, frame out that arch. And speaking of arch, this particular size, or I guess it's more the ratio of the arch, it matches 100% with the nested shape dies from Spellbinders. And that worked out. So I had speculated that might be the case when I first did my unboxing of the clubs. And I'm so glad that it worked out that way. Of course, it probably was no mistake that it worked out that way. They, I'm sure, designed it to work out perfectly, because what that allowed me to do is die cut a bit of vellum, and that vellum's going to match 100% that arch shape. And I'm using a dotty tape runner, which is great for die cuts like these, things that are curvy, things that have irregular borders, because it's just little dots of adhesive. It can really just grab and form right around those curvy edges, and that way you still get adhesive edge to edge, but you don't have a lot of glue that sticks out beyond those borders. And what I'm going to do is turn this into a shaker. So I just picked out, these nested dies, they're pretty close in size to one another. So when I chose the two dies that are larger than the one that I used for cutting my vellum, I used that die, and then I went, I think it was 2 sizes up from that to get this nice border all the way around. And it ends up being about like 1/4 of an inch if you use one size and then you skip a size and then the next size up from that. is gives you about 1/4 of an inch. So that's gonna be, I think, good for being able to get some foam behind this frame, because for the shaker I need to use some foam, and that to actually enclose the shaker bits, and the frame that's around the stamped image after you die cut it, it's very, very thin. It's a very delicate frame, so I needed to kind of bulk it up a little bit with the solid color cardstock. And all I'm doing is I have some foam on a roll, so I just cut off a strip, but it's rather wide. So I just took I use a utility knife, but you could use a craft blade to just cut that in half. And I'm going to secure some foam all the way around this entire frame. You want to make sure, if you've never made a shaker before, that you don't leave any gaps at all in this wall of foam that you're creating, because that's going to be the well that your shaker bits will move around in. So you want to make sure that there are no gaps, because otherwise your shaker bits could actually fall out. Now this is the watercolor panel that I originally stamped onto. I had cut it down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I stamped right in the center and die cut right out of the center. That way I can still use that watercolor card all the way around, because it's not a bright white. It's more of a it's not super creamy. It's just a little bit off-white, and it matches, obviously, the paper that I stamped onto, because it's from that, and I feel like that looked better than my actual card base. So and plus, it's just scrap anyways. I would have just tossed it if I didn't use it, so why not use it? Now, normally when I make a shaker card, if you've ever watched my videos, you know that I actually pour the bits into the shaker unit, and then I put a second layer of acetate behind to close off my shaker and have it be essentially an independent unit, so that it can so that it's easier for me to position. But because I'm positioning this onto the original panel that I die cut the frame out of, that gives me a really good idea for how to position this. And it's a large enough shaker well, like the space in between the arch. It's big enough to where I can actually, because I always have the hardest time making shaker cards this way, because the shaker bits, I'll make a little mound of it and it won't be in the right place, or I'll have a hard time positioning it. But because I was positioning this over the original panel that I die cut from, that really helped me to position things. And because the shaker well itself is so big, I didn't have a problem with attaching this and not getting the sequins too close, or actually behind the foam adhesive. So this worked out well this time, but usually I make my shaker cards a little bit differently. But you do whatever works for you, because my method of doing it does require an extra piece of acetate, so you would save yourself a bit of acetate if you use this method. And to finish off my card, I'm just using these are little dots that I've made with my leftover wax. So anytime I do any wax seals, I just pour off whatever is left in the spoon, and I make these little dots. And that way, I have these perfect, kind of like enamel dots, but they can range from being relatively flat to being a little bit more dimensional. Kind of depends on how hot your wax is. If your wax is really hot, it will tend to spread out a little bit more. But if your wax isn't super hot, or you're getting to the end of, pouring out these dots, it does tend to, because it's a little bit thicker, it does tend to be a little bit more dimensional. So that would be the only thing that, as compared to, say, making your own Nuvo drops. That would be the thing that differentiates it a little bit. But for me, it's just a way to save or just use whatever wax was left over in the spoon, so I'm just not wasting it. And the dots form perfectly every time. They dome perfectly every time. With Nuvo drops or any kind of drops like Nuvo drops, you got to do, for me anyways, that little swirl technique to really get it to dome nicely. And I'm not always successful with getting a perfect dome on my Nuvo drops. That's why I always do them on a bit of the foam release or a bit of paper release liner, because then anything that's misshapen, I can just choose not to use. So I very rarely put my Nuvo drops directly on my project for that reason. But these wax seals, they dome perfectly every time, which is great. And for my sentiment on this card, I am doing the same thing that I did on my layered card. I stamped out my sentiment, and I used the coordinating die to die cut out the sentiment, but also to die cut out a second piece from solid color cardstock to use as a drop shadow. Now, my final card today is my pop-up card, and this card will feature a combination of the small and the large die of the month. I'm going to start off with my opened card base here. So this is going to be ultimately an A2 card, which folded will measure 4¼ by 5½. So this panel that I am stenciling onto right now is 5½ tall by 8½ wide. And I have this cloud stencil that I just drew it up on Photoshop and used my Cricut to cut it out. And so you can always do that. If you have a one of those electronic cutting machines, you can get digital cut files if you don't want to design your own, and just buy some Mylar and then cut out your own stencils. So it's really great to have that option. And the cloud one, and I think I designed one or two others that I knew I would use often. And this way you can kind of make it whatever size you want. And that way, you're not constrained by what you can find in other shops. So for example, if you like to make slimline cards, you could make a stencil that is really wide, like maybe a 9-inch wide stencil, so that you can have one continuous line of clouds all the way across. But I am just going to use a little bit of Distress Oxide to give myself a nice cloudy sky. I did score this already at 2 1/8, and then again at 4 1/4. And I just folded them as a zigzag. So on the 2 1/8 line, I scored that, or I folded that as a valley fold. And then at the 4 1/4 mark, I folded that as a mountain fold. So you basically just make your regular card base the way you would, and then on your front panel, score your front panel in half at 2 1/8, and then fold it back against itself, bringing the outer edge towards the folded edge. So my card will be a double Z fold. So with the card base as you see it or saw it a moment ago, that would just be a regular Z fold. And to make this more of a pop-up, I'm going to add a strip at the bottom, which will also have that Z fold, that little zigzag in it, and that will turn this into a double Z fold card. For that bottom strip, I have a bit of solid color green, and I've cut that also to, I think it ended up being around 2½ inches tall and 8½ inches wide. And I've taken a grassy border die. This was from an earlier club kit. I think it was the large die of the month. It was the one where it had an interactive mechanism where you can kind of pull on a tab and make up to, I think, 3 different characters shimmy a little. And so that was a really fun one, and I think it was Easter themed. There was a duck, a chick, and I think there was another critter, a bunny maybe, I think, those 3. Really, really cute set. Love that it had a interactive mechanism. But from that, I'm just using this nice grassy border. And as I mentioned, this piece needs that Z fold as well. It's just going to be opposite so that you have a stretch that's 4 1/4 wide. You want to mountain fold that. And then you want to score 2 1/8 from the right edge and valley fold that. Now, I have already done a lot of die cutting of the tulip from the small die of the month, and I've die cut the petals out of rainbow colors, and this little bunny is super adorable. The bunny is from the large die of the month, and it might look a little bit weird. You might be wondering where the head is. Well, the bunny is from the perspective of its backside. As if it was jumping into something. Now, with the large die of the month, you get this really nice woven basket and some additional florals, but the bunny has been designed so that it can be put into a scene with that basket as if it was jumping into the basket of goodies. So I'm just assembling it. It doesn't have too many pieces. The bunny feet is layered. Those are layered, and then on the body of the bunny, there are some deboss lines that show you how to or where to line up the 2 feet and the bushy tail. So really, really cute. And then besides that, there are some bunny ears, which I haven't attached yet because I'm going to wait until I figure out where I'm going to use it on my card before attaching it, because I think those ears, depending on how you position them, you can kind of suggest where the head of the bunny is, and maybe a little bit of personality. Maybe one of the ears can be like a little bit floppy and the other one could be straight up. So there's some flexibility there. Now I'm going to start assembling my card now. I skipped ahead to assembling all of the flowers because the layering is really simple. Now to start, I'm going to put that grassy border and attach it to my card base. And I'm only attaching it to, on the right side, just that segment that is 2 1/8 wide. And then on the left side, I'm only adhering it to that front panel that is 2 1/8 wide. So on that green grassy border, there's a section in the center that's not glued down at all. And that's what actually is the pop-up when you open this card. Now I have got my rainbow of tulips that I'll just arrange going all the way across this card. And what I'm gonna do is put them in rainbow order, but I'm also going to attach some completely flat to the card base. And then others, I am going to put a little bit of 3D glue gel on the flower portion, on the top of the flower, so that it's a little bit dimensional, it's a little bit raised and suggestive of some distance, so that it kind of looks like this is a little bit of a field of tulips. And the stems, though, for all of the flowers, I'm gluing straight down to the card. There's not going to be any dimension there. And that way, everything looks very dimensional at the top, but relatively flat at the bottom. And if you remember from the preview at the very beginning of the video, the reason why I wanted to keep the bottom nice and flat is that, Well, for one, those stems, those flower stems are very, very thin. Even with my 3D glue gel, I think I would be hard pressed to get some dimension behind them. But second, I am going to cover all of those stems with another layer of grass. So I want it to be nice and flat so that I can glue over top of it. And I'm going to use a little bit of foam on that second layer of grass. So I don't need, for there to be dimension. It's better that the stems here are as flat as possible. And that way, when I glue on top of it, it doesn't add extraneous bulk to the card. So I'm just making sure that as I'm layering and staggering my flowers, I wanted to maybe work towards the center a little bit just to make sure that as I'm spacing this, I don't run out of room, and that way I can ensure that I get my full rainbow in here. But it's so pretty. It got a little bit tight towards the end. I should have been starting from the right side a little bit earlier, but I made it work. It's a little bit crowded on that right edge, but I think it's okay. And I'm just glad that I was able to fit the entire rainbow. So what's cool is that this will fold down completely flat. And so you'll see the beginning of that row of rainbow colored tulips, but as you open it up, you'll see, that entire field kind of stretch out a little bit. And the extra little surprise that I'm going to add is my little bunny, which will get revealed only when you open the card. So my second layer of grass, I cut the same way as that first one, and I'm using some low profile foam, so this is just 1 millimeter thick, and I'm not looking to get edge to edge on this. I actually intentionally left some space above the border, or towards the top of the border, where my foam doesn't go all the way to the top. And the reason for that is that I have even more flowers. So what's cool about this set is that you have layering dies. It's just 2 layers, really simple to assemble, of the tulip that's more, I guess it's more fully bloomed. And then you have a second tulip flower that's more of a bud before it's opened up. So I have buds die cut and assembled in each of the rainbow flower colors as well. I was going to use those as filler just to really mix them in with the fully bloomed tulips and really make it nice and full. So what I'm doing is actually adding them behind the top or the second layer of grass so that you don't see the stems. They still are covered by that first panel. So that's why when I attach the second sort of row of grass, I didn't put adhesive all the way to the top. It leaves a little bit of a gap so that I can tuck these stems behind there, and that way it's still nice and seamless, and I can actually kind of just tuck them here and there wherever I feel like it needs to be a little bit fuller. And so now with the bunny, I wasn't exactly too sure where to put the bunny, but I was really glad that he fits on this, because he's a pretty decent size. He's I think probably around 2 inches wide, which means that he fits on this panel on the right hand edge, and he can be completely hidden until you open the card, which I think is the fun of a pop-up card, is that there's a little bit of a reveal. So, what you might see at the when the card is closed in its, I guess, default state, so to speak, is a little bit different, doesn't tell the full story of, what you would see when you open the card. So that's my definition of a pop-up card, where a lot of the fun is on the inside of the card. Now here, we don't have an inside of a card in the traditional sense, because once this is open, it's it is meant to just be displayed open like this. And so where you would write your message is probably on the very back of the card. And what I decided to add was this really big carrot, which is part of the large die of the month, because I wanted to give the bunny a reason for why he's hopping behind this sort of grassy this sort of grassy hill here. I wanted to make it seem like he's really trying to get at this big carrot, because scale wise the carrot's pretty large compared to the flowers. So so what I'm gonna do is tuck some of those buds in and tuck my carrot behind that grassy border as well. And then I will attach my little bunny to this border here, so that it looks like he's diving behind this little mound, or this little hill or row of grass. And that's going to kind of complete the surprise element, so to speak. And I'm also going to use some 3D glue gel behind the carrots and those little flower buds. So this is going to be pretty dimensional at the end of the day. I don't think this is one that will ship with out extra postage, because it's going to end up being not, I think weight wise it'll be okay, but it's more the thickness, because when you get the Z fold it down, all of those stacks of flowers and all the 3D glue gel that I added and all the layers and rows of flowers, it's going to be more than a quarter of an inch, which is the limit if you want to just mail something for a single stamp. So this is definitely not one that will go for a single stamp. Might even be one that you want to send with a little bit of protection, and then maybe like a padded envelope so it doesn't get overly crushed. To finish the card though, I want to add a bit of a sentiment. Oh my. So, if you watched my videos, that the sentiment on a card is often the last thing I think of, and had I thought of it earlier, I might have been more inclined to maybe stamp and emboss in white, perhaps, the sentiment on that grassy section of grass on the left side. But there's so much irregular dimension right now with that already attached to my card. There was no way I was going to risk it. and we're like almost at the finish line here. So I wouldn't even risk it in a stamp positioning tool. I considered it, but then I thought better of it. So I stamped my sentiment. Again, this is from the clear stamp of the month. And I decided to go with the sentiment, live life in full bloom, which I think is really a great match for all of these tulips and the florals that you get with the small die. I only use maybe like 2 dies from the small die of the month. I use the 2 tulips, but the stems I actually use from the large die of the month. So that's where I got the green stems to attach them to. And so that's just a very small portion of what you get with the small die of the month. You get amazing and a different variety of flowers as well. But for this card, I wanted to do just a field of tulips, and so that's what I stuck with. And with some of these leftover buds, I decided to group them and then use some twine to tie them together as a little, kind of like a little bunch, that you would maybe give. And I use that to accent my sentiment. So that will, and again, I added even more 3D glue gel behind there too. So that finishes up my pop-up card, and here's a final close-up look at the 4 cards that I made today. This is my flat card, which features the 3D embossing folder, and for the sentiment, I used Happy Easter from the clear stamp of the month. Next up is my layered card, and on this card I am featuring the stencil of the month, the Better Press Club, and again the sentiment is from the clear stamp of the month. You do get Better Press sentiments, so that's also an option. There's 2 that come with the Better Press Club, and if you get the add-on to the Better Press, you'll have an additional sentiment from that set as well. And then here's my interactive card, which features the focal image from the clear stamp, and the sentiment is also from the clear stamp of the month. And to make this card, you definitely need that coordinating die, because it does cut out all of the inside areas around the flower, which give us some space to see through to all of the shaker bits. And finally, my pop-up card features the small die of the month for the tulip flower, the large die of the month for the tulip stems. The bunny and the carrot come from the large die of the month, and the sentiment comes from the clear stamp of the month. Thank you so much for joining me today for my flip video. I'll leave links to all of the clubs in the description box below if you want to check any of them out. Thanks for joining me today. At the end of this video, I'll link to another Spellbinders video as well as my Spellbinders playlist, where I put all of my videos featuring Spellbinders products. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye.